Martin grabs the sword, he lifts it up and says, I come in the strength and the power of Daniel. A great sea monster rises up out of the sea, gets the dragon down on the ground, snaps off his head. Red as a tomato, green as a cucumber. Long ago, there was a time when all the men were brave and all the young ladies were pretty. And there was a certain man, his name was Martin Davidson. He lived in the Emerald Land. When he was younger, he was a famous dragon slayer. But now, he's seen 70 summers. He no longer has the strength of his youth. His strength is fading. No longer does he have the respect of his family and his community, and he's beginning to feel that he doesn't have value anymore. And it's been many years since there's been any dragons in the Emerald Land. But recently, a dragon has set up its den on top of Destruction Mountain. And it's been raising havoc over the people of the Emerald Land. A meeting was called. All the elders of the land got together. And they decided Martin Davidson would go and slay the dragon. But Martin said, I cannot go. I don't have the strength of my youth. I'm not as fast as I used to be. I'm too old for this. I will not go. Fear reigned over all the people of the Emerald Land. What would they do? Some days after the meeting of the elders, Martin was walking through the woods, and he came across a young boy. The young boy's name was Luke. Now, Luke was a great-grandson of Daniel. Daniel was a man who had mentored and trained Martin in the fine art of dragon slaying. Luke said to Martin, Martin, you're the only one who can slay the dragon. Come with me, I want to show you something. So he took him to his home, and he brought him the sword. This was the sword that he was given from his great-grandfather. His great-grandfather had said to him, when the dragons return to the land, take this sword and you'll be able to slay any dragon. So he handed it to Martin. And he said, and my grandfather said that when you use it, you have to say, I come in the strength and power of Daniel. Well, strength and confidence began to grow in the heart of Martin. And he began to think that perhaps his best days were not behind him. Perhaps he could still slay dragons. So he took the sword and he mounted his mighty steed. He began riding through the forest. Soon he sees ahead of him a lion. The lion is running as fast as it can towards him. And Martin's steed builds up speed, and he's running as fast as he can towards the lion. Martin grabs the sword, he lifts it up and says, I come in the strength and the power of Daniel. A hive of bees came and started attacking the lion, and the lion turned tail and ran off through the woods. So Martin on his steed continues riding as fast as he can to the sea. He gets to the sea, and there's a great storm raging. Wind is blowing. Waves are crashing against the shore, but there's an old fisherman there. And he tells the fisherman what his mission is. The fisherman says, take my canoe and go. So he hops in the canoe and he starts paddling across the water. The waves are crashing against the canoe. Wind is blowing. Thunder and lightning in the air. But it gets worse because a great sea monster rises up out of the sea, opens his mouth to swallow Martin, and end his canoe whole. But Martin again takes out his sword and he says, I come in the strength and power of Daniel. That old sea monster just did a complete somersault and then sank down to the bottom of the sea. Again, Martin paddled across to the other shore, and he looked up, and there was Destruction Mountain ahead of him. Gets out of the canoe and he starts going up Destruction Mountain. But he doesn't get very far, and he sees a grizzly bear with 2 cubs. The grizzly sees him and starts charging towards him. Martin grabs out his sword and he says, I come in the strength and power of Daniel. The grizzly stumbled over a log, fell down and banged its head on the rock and knocked itself out. Martin continued going out up the mountain. He gets to the top of the mountain and he sees the den of the dragon. Fear overtakes him. And he begins to doubt whether he can do this. Now it's not too late. He knows he can turn around and turn tail and go back down the mountain. But then he remembers the words of Luke. He remembers the strength of the words and the sword. So he calls the dragon out of the den. The dragon comes running out of the den. Red as a tomato, green as a cucumber, large as anything, and he's bellowing out smoke out of his mouth and his nostrils and fire. Daniel pulls out the sword. Just as he pulls out the sword, the sky gets dark. Thunder roars, lightning flashes, hits a snake on the ground, and that snake is transformed into a pterodactyl. The pterodactyl lifts its wings and starts flying and starts attacking the dragon on the head. Daniel takes the sword and says, I come in the strength and power of Daniel, and he starts slashing at him and beating down the dragon. He turns around and decides his mission is done. He goes back down the mountain. He gets into the canoe and is paddling it across the sea. And then he begins to wonder, was my strength in the words, I come in strength and power of Daniel? Or was it the sword? Or was it something else? When he gets to the other side of the sea, he meets a fisherman. He explains to the fisherman what he had done and the questions that he had, and the fisherman thought from it. Then he said, your strength was not in the sword. And your strength was not in the words. The strength come from your heart. The strength and power flowed out of your heart. You only need the sword and the words to let that fountain flow. So Daniel got on his steed and he rode back home. He met Luke and he explained to Luke what had happened. And Luke said to him, you keep the sword. Martin says, I don't need the sword anymore. For I have learned that my strength does not come in words or in swords. My strength comes from my belief. What I believe in, what I believe determines my destiny. Back to you, Mr. Goldsmith.